Good evening and welcome to the Green Hour. I'm Beth, I'll be your host today, and of course you are listening to the Green Hour on Radio Free Nashville at 107.1 FM and 103.7 FM. Low power for the people, or on the web at www.radiofreenashville.org. So as I said, I'm Beth and I will be your host today. I just want to remind you that this portion of today's programming is brought to you by Tennessee Prompters, the region's largest full-service teleprompter provider, with more than 3 decades experience, offering an extensive inventory of services from convention speeches to video productions and beyond. Performance confidence begins with trusting who is putting the words in your mouth. TennesseePrompters.com. And just to let you know, Community Share's Dream for the Future of Tennessee looks something like this. Clean air and water, access to health care, good jobs, quality education, fair treatment under the law, and freedom from violence. You can help make this dream come true by getting Community Shares into your workplace giving campaign. Visit communitysharestn.org to learn how. Community Shares. Be part of the solution. And of course, this is the Green Hour, but we have a lot of other great shows on Radio Free Nashville. Turtle Radio is for the big kid and the itty-bitty kid in all of us. Host Auntie Bobbin uses multicultural songs and stories to encourage respect for ourselves and others. You'll hear rock, jazz, folk, and reggae that are grown-up friendly. How often do you hear Nat King Cole, the Ramones, Alison Krauss, Les Care, and Trout Fishing in America in the same hour? It's all on Turtle Radio. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. and Auntie Bobbin would love to hear from you. Just go to Turtle Radio at radiofreenashville.org. And I'm very excited today because for this program we actually have a guest here. I have with me Peyton Williams, who has earlier this summer actually went to the Global Greens meeting in Korea. So I'm going to actually, just a second, could you say hello, Peyton?
Thank you for having me, Beth. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so maybe speak a little closer to the mic, and yeah.
Thank you for having me, Beth. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I think that will probably do. Let's try the other mic just to be sure. Let's see if that's got a better pickup.
Thank you for having me, Beth. Glad to be here.
I think it probably doesn't matter. You can stick with that one. Okay. But yeah, and I can put up the volume on that too a little bit. So I'm really excited, first of all, in this post-COVID world, to have a guest in the studio, and I'm also excited to have Peyton here. But I'm a little bit rusty on the mics. So while I get things together, I'm going to see if we can maybe have some more music. Okay, and welcome back. So that was a Green song, and as I said, we're here with our guest Peyton Williams, who has just come back. Well, not just come back, came back earlier this summer. He went to the Global Greens meeting in Korea. So if you could maybe start, Peyton, what is Global Greens and how did you get involved?
So basically, the Global Greens is a meeting of, I'm not entirely sure what the number is. I think it's like 87, green parties and organizations, from, basically every continent, except for obviously Antarctica. But, they're green parties in practically every country you can think of. And this is actually not the first Congress that I've been to. I was also at the last one, and that was in Liverpool. And since I was 17 at the time, and I have grandparents in Germany, so they flew over, and I met them in London. We took a road trip up to Liverpool, and I went to that Congress for 3 of the 4 days, I believe. And I had the opportunity then to meet Jill Stein and take a picture with her, and we talked for a few minutes. And back then, so basically, I was just observing. I wasn't, taking an active role. As for this Congress, the most recent one, and that was in Shan, how you pronounce it? That has been on my radar for about a year, but I thought it was pie in the sky that I would go because at the time my finances were pretty crap and honestly still pretty crap. But in any case, I actually found a website where I could pay for the flight in 24 separate installments. So I thought, what, that's a killer deal. Paying off a $2,600 flight in 24 installments. That's basically $100 a month. Still paying it off. In any case, that was the biggest expense taken care of. So I thought, what, I'm just gonna hop on this chance, to go. And this marks my 24th country. I've been privileged to have traveled quite a bit. And I will say, out of all the countries I've been to, this definitely ranks in, the top. The food is great, the people are great, the public transit is great. Now, as for the conference, so I'm trying to think of where to start. The first day, we had the opening ceremony, of course. We had a number of speakers, and we even had... so you just played a Green song. Oh, we had a Green song as well, although I think that was the closing ceremony. So I'm jumping a little bit, too forward here. But yeah, so over those few days, I took the time to go into various workshops, and I met a number of fellow Greens in my age bracket. I'm 23. The energy, the passion, the vision that these young Greens shared, was quite inspiring, I will say. That gives me hope for the future.
Yeah, great. And so, as you were talking, I was wondering, what is the language of communication at the conference? Do they have translators available, or how did that work?
So most people there could speak English, but there were a few that either could not or for whatever reason chose not to. There were translation services, and for the most part, they worked pretty okay, but there were a few hiccups where the live captioning or closed captioning, whatever you call it, there were a few bugs. So there were a few workshops, a few speakers where, unfortunately, I was not able to follow along. And then, so sometimes they would get it working maybe halfway through, and I would get half of what they were saying. So that was a barrier, I will say. But for the most part, it was English, but there were a few times where, there was that language barrier. And sometimes they would translate, but, sometimes they couldn't. So. Yeah,
I was... traveling last summer for complicated reasons. I was meeting. My husband had been working abroad for a year, and we met halfway at the halfway point, which was Istanbul, and had a little family vacation. And one of the things that, as far as language, apart from the fact that if you stay in the tourist police section of Istanbul, you don't actually have to know anything but English. You can get by pretty well. But getting on a flight, I think it was actually a Turkish Airlines flight from Istanbul to Frankfurt, and all of the safety regulations were in two languages, and Turkish was not one of them. So it really gave me a sense of sort of language privilege there. So I think I'm going to want to hear more about the workshops that you attended and resolutions and things that are happening and all sorts of other stuff. But we're going to take another little musical break right here. We're going to hear Miriam Makeba, who was from South Africa and was one of my... I liked her music long before I knew about her politics, and now that I know about her politics, she is a hero for me. But we're going to hear a little song called Pata Pata. Okay, that was Miriam Makeba, and she is one of, as I said, one of my heroes. She was highly instrumental in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and in fact continued singing and bringing her message with music and through music right up until the time of her death. She literally was on tour in Italy and died on stage, which is a horrible, horrible loss to the musical world, but she is great. So as I said, I'm here with Peyton Williams, and he went to the Global Greens meeting in Korea in 2023, so that was a couple months ago now. It's amazing how the summer has gotten away from us all. But I was really impressed. You can go and look them up on the web, and on their website, they have all of their resolutions. You can go into them in a lot of great detail. So I'll start just giving you a smattering of some of the things. For example, they had a resolution on climate migration and displacement, protection of animal rights, foreign debt, South Atlantic ecosystems, nuclear waste, child marriage, youth participation in a sustainable future, different parts of the world, the Mediterranean, ecocide in the Americas, all sorts of stuff like that. And then they had some emergency resolutions, and I'll actually read out those for you. These were things that they felt were so pressing that even though their normal bureaucracy wouldn't have had them push out quite that fast. They felt like they really needed to do it. International Declaration of a Climate Emergency. So we all think of Greens as being climate people, and they certainly are, but also for civil rights. LGBTQIA plus rights is also something they had a statement on. Another one, this is sort of a long title. When gender inequality evolves, we should too, on gender-based discrimination and misconduct. Then there's something hot off the internet, effective regulation of AI technology for democracy, sustainability, and social good. Action on water emergency. There's actually water emergency several parts of the world. Maybe I'll get John on one of his shows to talk about it. Central Eurasia is a huge water emergency location. And finally, ecocide in the Akholva region, and this has to do with the war in Ukraine caused by that Russian invasion. Although I would point out, of course, just for the record, is although Putin is clearly overwhelmingly responsible for sending tanks across the border, the entire situation was in part created by our own country and our militarist provocative policies. So we really need to just stop blaming people and have peace. Let's have peace, folks. So, but meanwhile, Peyton was an observer there, so didn't have much to do with the resolutions, but you went to a lot of cool workshops. Can you tell us about some of those?
Probably my favorite workshop had to do with grassroots democracy, and we had a number of speakers from various countries representing various Green parties, but probably my favorite one was Howie Hawkins. He ran last time around, and I believe he's running this time around as well, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, he talked about the Paris Commune, for instance.
Yeah, so Hawkins is really great. He's sort of both red and green. He's both a socialist and a green, so he can tell you about the Green Party and progressive movements within the context of historical socialism, which includes, of course, Marxist socialism, but a whole range of other socialism. As far as him running, I haven't heard that he's running. The person that people have really been talking about is Cornel West is apparently looking for our nomination, and there are also a few other people that are getting campaigns together. So once those get more organized, I expect that we'll have a pretty lively discussion of campaigns. So, and I've heard Howie Hawkins speak, and he is inspirational. So what did you really love about him?
Well, he was charismatic, and he was funny and also personable. He was very easy to talk to, and also very smart. I will hand him that for sure. But yeah, so his presentation on grassroots democracy, honestly failing to recall, the specifics. He did talk about the Paris Commune, and I just drew a blank on some of the other ones. I think he talked about the American Revolution as well, and labor councils or something like that.
Yeah, and he actually was, I think, a member of the Teamsters.
Gotcha.
So he actually has some labor, good solid labor credentials.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I like about going to Green conferences is just hearing all of the different different speakers from all over the United States speaking, and they all have different perspectives. But I think one of the things about being a Green is that you don't. Most people today don't just sort of drift mindlessly into Greens, being Greens. I mean, a lot of people, I'm Democrat because my parents are Democrats, or I'm a Republican because my parents are Republicans, or whatever. But Greens, I think you have to think about it to become a Green. And the result is that by the time people get well established in the Green parties to the point where they're running workshops and things, they actually have very, very thoughtful and insightful things to say about society, I find.
Right. Well, for me, so being a Green, being a socialist, I would say I am the only one of my family who has that inclination. And for me, I definitely took meticulous research and personal experience as well. But then, we talked about this earlier. The past few cycles, I voted blue, straight down the line, simply because it was convenient at the time. But now's the time to vote for the greater good and not just the lesser evil.
Yeah, and I think there's really a movement. I mean, the great thing about the Greens also is that it is international. There are Greens in England, there are Greens in Africa, there are Greens in all across South America, and so on. So there really is sort of a push for this. And it means occasionally when Greens get together, there are some conflicts. I mean, because what looks green when you're in France isn't necessarily what looks green when you're in Mexico or Venezuela. But ultimately, our core is that we really are committed to an ecological perspective, a grassroots perspective, and really trying to make the world a livable and sustainable place, both socially and ecologically and economically as well.
Probably one of my main takeaways from the Congress was so even though the various Green parties they had their differences and sometimes they were stark, typically on social issues, but so as far as the environment is concerned anyway, that was something that we all rallied around together in unison. And, that is, probably the most pressing issue of our time, or at least, one of the most pressing issues of our time, the planet. Because if we don't have a planet, we can't really, solve any other problem.
Yeah, it's amazing the human ability to sort of mess up a good thing.
Yeah.
See, but of course, there are also some bright things, and one of them comes from the arts. So we've got a little bit more. This is some music from a rather cool collection called Arabic Grew, and this is called. Let's see. I think this is track 1. Abdel Ali Silmani is Moi et Toi in French because it's from Algeria. There we go. I was having trouble with my button. The mic button wouldn't stay down. Anyhow, so that was from an album called Arabic Groove and Moi et Toi by Abdel Ali Silmani. And just want to remind you, of course, you're listening to Radio Free Nashville, 107.1 and 103.7 FM. And this portion of today's programming is brought to you by Tennessee Prompters, the region's largest full-service teleprompter provider, with more than 3 decades experience, offering an extensive inventory of services from convention speeches to video productions and beyond. Performance confidence begins with trusting who is putting the words in your mouth. TennesseePrompters.com. And again, as I said earlier, Community Share's dream for the future of Tennessee looks something like this. Clean air and water, access to health care, good jobs, quality education, fair treatment under the law, and freedom from violence. You can help make this dream come true by getting community shares into your workplace giving campaign. Visit communitysharestn.org to learn how. Community Shares. Be part of the solution. So we've got Peyton Williams here. I'm going to put your mic back on now. And thought you might want to tell us a little bit about just cool people you met and networking opportunities and other things at this meeting.
Probably my favorite group to hang out was the Global Young Greens. And most of them were my age, so that's early 20s. And probably my main takeaway from that generational divide is, so you have the more status quo established, older Greens, and then you have the younger Greens. And there is that divide of socialism versus capitalism. So probably my main mission going over there was to get a pulse for, the sentiment surrounding capitalism. And how, for me anyway, from my vantage point, our top priority should be to topple capitalism and to institute some form of socialism. Now, of course, there are different forms that we can talk about, what that looks like. But, the economy, should on some level be controlled cooperatively. So that anyway was my main goal. And from the conversations that I had, so most people my age, were asking, hey, how come we're not addressing the elephant in the room? And that is capitalism. Because so those workshops that we talked about earlier and the presentations, the speakers, the various, speeches that were given, we mostly talked about treating the symptoms of capitalism or, just trying to curb its excesses. But really, we have to do far more than just reform. We need systemic change at the root. And if you ask me, that requires, toppling capitalism and replacing it with socialism. But in any case, the point I was going to make is that most people my age are the Global Young Greens. So they were asking the question of, so how come we're not, talking about the elephant in the room? And that should be the top priority before we can accomplish anything else, because we can buy some time in terms of saving the planet, in terms of protecting workers' rights and blah blah blah, and trying to close the gap, or at least to narrow the gap between the poor and the rich. But all we can really do is just tweaks around the edges, at least within the confines of a capitalist system. And that was probably my main takeaway from the conference. Because so the older generation there, and primarily from my experience, most of the Greens from Europe, they seem to be more social democratic than anything else.
Yeah. So, and I find the Greens in the United States are quite divided on that. There's something of a youth elders divide, but interestingly enough, I mean, some of the elders, as I was Peyton and I met for dinner before the show, and one of the things we talked about is there actually are quite a number of Greens in Tennessee who came out of basically a small scale communal living, so down on the farm, and that really gave them a sense of what could be, that you actually could have a bunch of people working together and not worrying about who owed who money or anything like that. It's hard to do, I think, in the middle of a capitalist society, because there are forces on every side, and eventually it was banking and healthcare bills that pulled them down. But it's possible to do these things. I also have a great refrigerator magnet. I'm not sure where we got it from, with a quote from Ursula Le Guin, who says, people just can't imagine, because capitalism is so entrenched, a world without capitalism. But they also said that about divine right of kings. So I'm sure I didn't get the exact words. She always says things so much more elegantly. Let's do another little bit of music. I didn't choose music very carefully, but I did try to give it at least an international flair since we're doing Global Greens. This is from Hector Villalobos, so something a little bit more classical, and it's I like this piece because it's a train piece. It's you can actually hear clickety clacks and whistles and things that he's built into the orchestration. Okay, so that was Hector Villalobos, and that is the let's see the exact title here, The Little Train of the Caipira. And so that was always I think my father had that on LP when I was a kid, and I always liked that. I don't usually like programmatic music. I always feel like people who want to make a flute sound like a bird just have failed terribly. But I think he succeeded in getting the train sound into that. So I'm here with Peyton Williams, and he is going to be talking about his time at the Global Greens. And of course, it wasn't all business. You got to actually see a little bit of Korea there. So can you tell us some of that?
Right. Well, honestly, where to start? Pretty funny that you just played some music that involved train noises, and I actually have a funny story involving the subway system there. So my last night before I flew back home the next day, I went to Gwangjang Market, and that is in the heart of Seoul. And my plan was to knock one more thing off my bucket list, and that is to get street food there. Now, come to find out, they only took cash, of course, because why would they take card? And I should have taken the time to make sure that I had cash on me, but I actually didn't have very much. So I went to the nearest ATM, and it rejected every single one of my cards. I had like 4 or 5 different cards, some credit, some debit, and it rejected all of them for some reason. So I thought, fine, okay, I'll just head back to the hotel, and there's a restaurant right next door, so, I'll just call it a night then. So I hopped onto line 1, the same line that I had taken multiple times between Seoul and Incheon. So line 1 is navy blue. And I hopped onto, the same station that I got on, multiple times. And I thought, okay, cool, so 40, 50 minutes until I'm back, I'm just going to scroll on my phone mindlessly and kill the time. And then, so 40 minutes or so passed, and I thought, I should probably be getting close, about now. So I looked up. and then none of the stations were even close, to mine. uh, because so at first the stations were all the same, and they were going in the a direction that I'd gone multiple times already. So I thought, okay, cool. I'll just kill some time on my phone, and then come to find out that so line 1 apparently splits off at a certain point and goes in two entirely different directions. So I'm like, okay, what the heck, man? So I took a look at Google Maps, and lo and behold, my route, the direction it should have gone, was I think west, and it diverged and went south. I'm like, okay, crap. So I had to get off, circle back around to where I came from, and then from there transfer onto the correct, direction. And then I got back to the hotel a full hour later than I'd actually planned on. And at that point, the restaurant that I planned to go to was already closed. They closed at 9, I think. They closed at 9, and I got back to the hotel at 10. Well, actually, I'm trying to think if I remember that right. But in any case, so I got there after they closed. And the options were either fast food or a convenience store. Now, there was a McDonald's nearby. Now, so I can't speak for anyone else, but I have a very visceral aversion to McDonald's. I can't stand it, here or anywhere else. So I thought, well, okay, I could, but no. So I went into 7-Eleven. And my dinner that night was...
It says something about how international commerce is, that there were McDonald's and 7-Elevens
right
on the other side of the world.
Right. Well, so it wasn't actually a gas station. It was just a regular convenience store. So no gas pumps or anything. So my dinner that night was some microwavable pasta. It was gross. Pringles and Bueno bars. That's definitely a far cry from the street food that I planned.
It's sort of amazing. You go across the world and you see McDonald's, you see Coca-Cola, you see all these other things. And it is possible to eat locally, but sometimes you have to work at it unless you're really off the beaten track.
But that one evening, I wanted, some street food because, there is, that atmosphere there, and the food is freshly prepared as well. So I thought, I should definitely cross that off my list.
Yeah.
Right. I should definitely cross that off my list. But in any case, of course, they didn't take card.
Yeah, I know the machines can be very, very picky. About, well, we're part of this network, but we aren't part of that network. Yeah. And
that was actually pretty stupid of me to not, double check at least that I had some cash on me, and to just go to Gwangjang Market with just my cards was actually pretty stupid in hindsight.
Yeah, well, it says something about our culture. Increasingly, I mean, one of the things I find is that I'm now old enough that things that I used to take for granted have now gone from being normal to rare to almost impossible. I mean, I recently found, for example, that you cannot park your car in downtown Nashville unless you have a cell phone and mobile data.
Really?
Yes, they got rid of the parking meters, and now you have to scan a one of those little QR codes,
right,
and go and pay for your... So I had taken my son to get, he wanted a piercing now that he's a teenager. And so nothing too big, just an ear. We as parents are just, I'm sure he's up for other things, but we aren't ready for that yet.
Right.
But he had to, and then they had to have a follow-up visit. When I took him the first time, the meters had been taken out and nothing had been put in their place. So I actually had free parking. But I went the second time, there's all these signs that tell you to use the QR code. So I went around to the back where there was a pay parking lot, but that also had a QR code. And what was funny was that there were a group of 4 or 5 people got out of this car, and they all had English accents, and they couldn't figure out how to make the QR code work, and they eventually left as well. And so I went around to the front and parked where I wasn't supposed to park without scanning the QR code, and my son went in and did everything necessary while I stood there and sent texts to various phone numbers listed on the signs to no avail. And then eventually, like 4 hours later, somebody texted me back and said, "How can we help you?" And it's like, I wanted to pay for parking, but I'm not there anymore. I left. I mean, I just
They make that way too complicated.
Yeah. So that's one of those odd things. But you're really creating a world of haves and have-nots. Is that if you don't not only have to have a phone, but it has to be in good shape and it has to be able to handle mobile data. Because for some reason I think I know why, and it's not going to be an easy fix. At some point, I think my service provider changed, and I think I had to do something to make my mobile data be accessible. But I haven't been able to use mobile data for ages, so I just use Wi-Fi, which is fine, except when you're in the middle of a busy city street trying to park.
Right.
But we've created then a have and have-not culture with that. Cash no longer works. I go to yard sales, and they say, "Oh, can you Venmo at me?" I said, "Then what?" So I feel like I probably need to get a Venmo account just so that I can buy things at yard sales, which should really be kind of a cash experience.
Well, so actually, so something else just came to mind. I think it was the second day I was there. I was in Seoul. So I hopped on the bus, and the fare for where I was going was only 92 cents. Now, I didn't have cash on me, and I assumed, for whatever reason, that they would take card. And of course they didn't, and they wanted me to pay, so either by bank transfer or a mobile app. And I tried both, and it wouldn't work. So I just got off the bus, and to this day, I still owe the Seoul government 92 cents.
Yeah, so
they're definitely going to throw me in jail for that.
I have a feeling I owe the city of Nashville whatever a parking meter would have cost. I think they've now made it a minimum of 1 hour for $2.25 or something like that. When it used to be you could put a quarter in, you can stay like 20 minutes. So it's become. So in some ways, for people who are privileged, things have become easier. I mean, when I was in New York City, I could just tap my credit card every time I went into the subway, which was a lot of fun.
Right.
Just doing that. And it worked beautifully for me. And it was, in fact, possible to go and buy a card that you could load up if you didn't want to be using a credit card all the time, or you couldn't for some reason. So it wasn't completely inaccessible to people. But I can't help thinking that are there people that are in fact being shut out because of this new way of accessing the subway? I think in New York City it is such an integral part of getting around that they couldn't really afford to make that a problem.
So of course, so my trip was in June, and to my understanding, they just got rid of, so paying for the bus with cash. They got rid of that, I believe, in March. So honestly, just a few months before I went over there. Crazy timing.
Yeah. So every now and then, we no sooner arrived back in the United States from Turkey than they got rid of the requirement that we get a COVID test before we got on the plane.
Right.
So if we'd only left 2 days later, we wouldn't have had to have these fancy Turkish forms to get our health checked. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, someday we're going to have to go in and just have us all sitting here, and maybe get my husband in too, about the wonders of public transit.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I grew up in New Orleans, which is a very public transit kind of city. And, of course, my husband's from New York. John, our co-host, is a guy from Queens, the ultimate public transit city.
Right.
When John was in Tajikistan, he unfortunately couldn't stay in his original posting in the spring because they were having a repressive crackdown there, and so the U.S. Embassy wanted him to stay out of that region. So he was in the capital city, and so he would on just every day he would get on a bus and go somewhere, and he got to see all the different neighborhoods of the city. He got way out to a Russian cemetery where he had his pocket picked, but he realized it was being picked, so he grabbed the guy by the arm and started shouting about police, and the guy gave him everything back. Or pretended he didn't know what was going on, and then somehow or another everything magically was restored to him.
Right.
Being, I think of 6 or 8 inches taller than your average citizen of Tajikistan, and having a tough New York accent probably helped.
Right.
Also, the word police.
Yeah.
But he saw all kinds of things. I think that was his only bad experience. That was the only thing he was even close to not feeling 100% safe, despite the government crackdowns on civil liberties. But he was a tourist. He wasn't political. He was just there. Or actually, he was a foreign scholar, but similar. But anyhow, one of the things I noticed, by the way, on the all the websites in the conference is they just simply said Korea. They didn't say North or South Korea. So I'm assuming this was South Korea if you're going to Seoul, of course.
But, oh no, this was in Pyongyang. Everybody, come on. Obviously.
Yeah. So, but I thought it was sort of interesting that they didn't. Presumably, South Korea just considers themselves all of Korea, and the North is just temporarily.
Wow. Are
not
they
under
both
their
claim
control.
each other, to my understanding?
Yeah, so neither one of them considers themselves South or North.
Yeah,
so I
they're
thought
both just Korea.
Yeah, so they both live in sort of parallel universes in which the other one doesn't exist.
Right.
So in any case, but traveling definitely does open things up. I remember going to Hungary. I had a great time in Hungary. I had like 5 different public transit experiences in one day, 5 different forms of transportation, because I got one of these multi-passes to go. But I also realized that when I arrived in Hungary, we had gone to several other countries on the way there, and I had not actually looked at the rate of exchange. So I looked at the Hungarian ATMs, and I didn't know how much money to get out. Mm-hmm. And so I guessed wildly. I said, well, I can see what the maximum amount you're allowed to take out. And in the United States, you're not at that point. None of the machines let you take out more than a couple $100s. So I figured I would just assume that Hungary had a similar thing. And so I just took out the maximum for 2 adults for a week and hoped that would do it. And it actually came just about out almost exactly right. We found a great a vegetarian restaurant. Which until we figured out what the exchange rate, we were very careful what we ordered. But once we figured out that we were having a multi-course meal for 2 for like $12 total, we started becoming more and more extravagant.
Well, the craziest currency that I had to deal with was probably the West African franc, which they use in Togo. I was casually spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, on just food.
Yes, and then
in their currency, of course.
The whole international economy thing. Well, I should probably put on our ending music here, and give our sign out. So, been lovely having you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Beth. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's get this rolling. Okay, and this is Radio Free Nashville, WRFN-LP, Pasquo, Tennessee. Low power for the people. And you can listen to it at 107.1 and 103.7 FM and on the internet at www.radiofreenashville.org. And this portion of today's programming is brought to you by Tennessee Prompters, the region's largest full-service teleprompter provider, with more than 3 decades experience, offering an extensive inventory of services from convention speeches to video productions and beyond. Performance confidence begins with trusting who is putting the words in your mouth. TennesseePrompters.com. And remind you as well about Community Shares. Getting to the root of problems just makes sense. Community Shares funds over 50 groups, including Radio Free Nashville, that are trying to get to the root of problems such as domestic violence, hunger, pollution, inadequate health care, and more. You can support Community Shares through workplace giving or by making a donation at communitysharestn.org. Be a part of the solution. And of course, this is just one of many programs on Radio Free Nashville. You can join host Jessica Carter for Friday Night Drama and let the sexiest voice in Nashville make you laugh, dance, and massage yourself with a speaker. Every Friday at 7, you'll hear local comics, actors, and musicians be inappropriate on the radio. And find out what's going on around town. Tune in every Friday at 7 for all the drama on Friday Night Drama, pushing FCC rules and regulations to the limit since 2005. And that's it this week for the Green Hour. See you again next time.